Thank you all for coming. So, exciting evening. I'm glad everybody's seen the show. But just for a couple of minutes, I just want to just talk about how the show came about. So, many of you know by now, but there is two of us, Vivian Roberts, I'm Vivian Roberts. And for a long time, we were being confused and we were getting each other's emails. And so we met up last year and we had a lovely lunch and we had so much in common. And so we were chatting about all sorts of things, a lot of spirituality. And Henri's like, well, there's a good show in this. Why don't we do it together? And so we did. We thought, well, what better? We're going to announce the two of us rather than actually always confuse us. And so that was the idea, kind of at the beginning of the show, or the beginning of conversations for the show. And I'd been doing, I'd just been presenting a paper for an art history conference, and it was about sort of feeling presences actually in 19th century mediumship. So that kind of like allowed me to have a thinking about the senses and thinking about how that will fit into the artist today. And then Vivian found this fantastic quote. So the title of the show, One Eye Sees, One Eye Feels, Vivian found, and it's like the perfect quote. And it just encapsulated everything that we wanted to sort of bring into it. And then we discussed the artists we knew, and so Vivian knew Joe, and Hannah and I knew Melissa and Olivia. So again, we just came together in this sort of perfect harmony. And this the show was born. And I've been thinking, going back into sort of like the history. I'm an art historian, so I went back into the history. And the quote that kept coming up in my mind was by a very, very early somnambulist who was a person who would go into these trances and then be able to produce these quite interesting things would happen. And she said, I feel, I behold. And so again, it's the same kind of idea. So as you'll see through the show, it's a trans-historical show, but with a weighting on the contemporary artists. But it goes all the way back to those times, and we're going to cover some of those topics. So the quote by Paul Klee, on it, Paul Klee is, and it considers painting as a multisensory practice, and bringing in things that we might not necessarily think. We think of more representation and the visual, and we're looking at all these as a visual piece of artwork, but there might be more behind it, and we're going to be asking artists a bit more about that. So the quote that I liked is like, this exhibition proposes an expanded understanding of perception, in which seeing, hearing, and feeling, or in psychic terms, clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairsentience, function as interwoven threads of awareness. And so that's the kind of the nugget of the show, about bringing all those together. We're weaving all sorts of levels in the show. We're weaving materials, we're weaving different artists from different ages, and bringing together in what I hope you find is a fantastic show. So to introduce 4 artists here, I just want to read a short bio for them, and then we can get into the artwork. Melissa Ali, the N. She was born in London, 1960s, and attended the Wimbledon School of Art and Central St. Martin's, where she had the amazing experience of attending the classes of the great visionary artist, Cecil Collins. She supports her studio practice with part-time teaching and became a hypnotherapist in 2002. And after suffering quite a lot of trauma in her life around 2006, Melissa's art took a new direction. She trained as a medium and became a fresh professional mesmerist with the sole aim of helping to heal others mentally and physically. Melissa exhibits widely and has her studio now in South London. She also teaches automatic painting at the College of Psychic Studies and was recently elected as a member of the London group. Olivia, here. Olivia was also born in London to Australian parents. In 1973, she moved to East Asia at the age of 4, beginning her schooling in Hong Kong and ended it in Japan in 1991. She then moved back to London and attended the Wimbledon School of Art. Ithell her Masters of Fine Art by Goldsmiths, and also attended the University of London. She's worked for galleries and continues to travel, living in Italy for several years before settling permanently in London with her son. And for the last 10 years, has had a studio at the Kindred Studio complexes in southwest London, where she exhibits her work. We've got Joe. Joe, London-based artist who works in ink and watercolour on paper, Leporello books and wall-hung sculptures, all exploring the flux and the fragility of the moment. She attended the Leaf School of Art in Edinburgh and École Visuelle des Beaux-Arts in Valence in France. She's had many solo shows and group exhibitions in the UK and France, and many experiences of residences in France, Portugal, China, and has just returned from a month in Iceland. So hopefully we'll hear a bit about that. Jo's works are in many private and public collections, including Royal College of Music, and you are a excellent tutor at the Paris College of Art and a visiting lecturer at the London Field School. Hannah studied for her Masters at Slade School of Fine Arts and became a member of the London Group in 2022. She's a director and curator of the Window Gallery, Glass Cloud Gallery in London. Residencies and expeditions into the wilderness inspire Hannah's work. In 2018, she completed a research trip to Iceland, followed in 2019 by a 3-month research trip across Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and South Carolina. I can't believe that. Hannah participates in many solo and group exhibitions, and her paintings are held in private collections in the UK, Iceland, USA, and Australia. So they are our 4 amazing artists, but we want to hear more about their work. So I'm going to start with a general question to all of you, and that is to try and bring in the idea of your work and how it fits in with the theme of the show, about the theme of sort of the senses, and do you use more than just one sense? Is there a group of sense at work, at play in one time? So if I could start with you, Melissa, start. Just a little bit about maybe your...
Okay, so it's very interesting because when I worked with Cecil, he talked a lot about the flow. And when we would draw in the life room from the model, he would command us to do, I don't know, like several things at the same time. So left hand, quill pen, tone 1, right hand, brush, tone 7, mouth, brushing the mouth. I mean, it was just completely discombobulating. But what was really fascinating about it was it meant that you lost any form of conscious control. And it was extremely about creating a kind of empathy with the model and about getting into the flow. And that really stuck with me. And it's so interesting working with hypnosis and working with mesmerism because it's all about going into different levels. So working with pieces like that, for instance, where I'm connecting to somebody, it might be that I will go into a different level. And what it will feel like is, say, you know, if I'm using a piece of paper which has got a signature on it, or which is to do with the person I'm making painting, or the painting to do with an energetic feeling. So it's about it's a kind of very clairsentient feeling, I suppose, but in my guard. And then when I know that and it's like a rise of energy. I'll talk about that a bit more in a bit, but it's also I can see, so I'll see things, and it kind of directs me as to what colour to use, what mark to make. Or it's just very generally about complete and utter intuitive feeling. And the energy is there, and then it might just suddenly stop. And when it stops, it just means no. That's it. It's such a fascinating thing. And it's a bit like being a conductor of an orchestra. You can feel it, you can see what there is to do, and then suddenly it just switches and you're going off in a different direction. But it's about kind of allowing and giving room for that and not imposing. I don't know what else to say, but that's really, for me, it's very much a felt experience, but I do see things as there as part of that. And the seeing things is more about guiding me as well, you know.
So it feels like something that can't necessarily be taught, but teaching techniques to overlook and it being able to have access to that might be. Oh, we touched on that in the other. What about you, Hannah? See you nodding. I thought I heard someone.
Well, yeah. I think there's two. I feel like two things. At first, I think my inspiration comes from being in the natural world. So I'll see things, especially sort of amazing sort of things in the landscape, whether it's cliffs, waterfalls, lakes, whatever. It's seeing things in nature that are, and they feel kind of amplified in some way for me. So there's the whole experience of being in the world is one thing, but then in the studio, when I kind of meditate on the place that I saw, it feels like a bit similar to you, in that I have to kind of be patient and create space. And we've talked about this idea of an analogy I made was that trying to get these kind of the shapes and the compositions to come to me is almost like trying to get a little bird to eat seeds out of my hand. Like I just have to just be really still. I can't sort of push it. I just have to trust that it's there. And it's funny because I see other colleagues and partners as well as well, I think they wonder why I have to be like that sometimes, but that's just how it works for me. It's yeah.
I think that's interesting. I think for a lot of the artists that I've come across and some of them in the show, they might have certain rituals or light a candle, sit in a certain chair, have a certain time of day, and it's in order for this. It's this moment that they can grasp,
Yeah.
and give it its most intensity because it might just go.
Yes.
So I can understand what you say.
It's funny though, because that thing is, it's also like completely true and so like right, and even though I have to kind of coax it out or to come to me, like when it's there, I'm like, that is just gold dust.
It's just a lovely feeling.
Yeah. I think it's maybe the partly working through it in my mind as well, how to visualize this thing that I felt, which needs, it needs that space and that kind of meditation.
I think what else? Actually, I should say there's going to be time at the end for questions. Save all your questions. But yeah, that's a really the interest ones to get into keys, steers. Yeah. Okay, well let's Henri here. Just a bit about senses.
The senses. I genuinely don't know what I'm doing with a blank canvas every single time. It's never predicting in my mind what I'm going to end up with. So I'm always quite surprised. That sense that inspiration is ever elusive to me. It takes a very long time to get into the flow. I'm quite ploddy in the studio, and I really irritate myself with that process often. But when it comes, it is actually almost like sort of that really intimate experience, almost as a child, where you're looking at something very intensely, and that's what I used to do quite a lot. I used to look at ants, I used to look at book illustrations, I used to look very closely at things, and it reminds me of the experience I have when I took up meditation, and you go into a certain mode of oneness with just being in a sort of half dream, half reality. Oh, I'm here again. This is and everything that you experienced the last time that you meditated, and you meant to do it twice a day, it comes back to you, but it doesn't come back to you during the day. And it's the same sort of experience when I'm painting, but it's elusive as well, and I can't conjure it up. I can't turn it on and flick on a switch. It's really annoying. Some people can, and they have rituals and things like that, and I need a ritual. It doesn't really get me going. I really do. But when you're there, it's just the most fantastic feeling, and every sense becomes alive and vital to what you're doing. But I can't make much sense of it. Or
Do you have some days where you go to the studio? Is that not happening?
stare into space? And that happens quite a lot. Yeah. But then it all comes out, and I can't describe the circumstances that conjure up.
Well, I say to our studio, and it's got a lot of artwork, so you must have some really good, flows working.
Lucky streak that
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
How for you, Dara?
Yes, I think I try not to feel anything. I think I try not to even be aware of what I'm feeling. So I'm trying not to feel. So I don't know if that's one sense or all the senses or what that is, but I'm just trying to do. So I think for me, just keeping working is what I do, and then there are points in that where it might go better and other points, but the feeling when I'm actually painting is not feeling.
Do you feel like there is, I was going to use the word torturous, but that's not the word really, but, a feeling that you're tussling and you're...
At times, yes. I mean, at times, yes, because I think there's a real disconnect between the experience of making the work and what people might feel or see or think or respond to when they see the work. And they have nothing to do with each other, often. So a painting that can be a real struggle, and what I would call one of my battlefields, may not look like that to a viewer. And that is not its meaning. That is just the process I went to. The meaning, I want to park it having a meaning. That is something that will come involved when somebody's looking at it. So, sorry, I've forgotten your question.
About sensing, about, so the balancing between maybe what you're seeing to what your thought process and thinking and feeling.
The thought process is one purely of responding and being in the moment of whatever I'm working on. So that is the thought process I think that I'm in, and I don't even know if it's a process or if it's just a state of being whereby I am working, and then I'm working. But I'm not. I don't know how else to say it really. I'm trying just to work and not to think.
Yeah, because you're I think unusual here in the fact that you have two kind of processes where you are working in the studio and then out of the studio.
Yeah.
And so do you feel that there's differences, or what would be the differences to your process? Or would it be identical to those two?
I think no. Well, whether I'm holding a piece of paper in a river, or whether I'm with it in the studio, there is and this is purely from me, there is almost a feeling of watching the work being made. So obviously when you're working in the river, that's even more accentuated, because literally the flow of water over the paper is leaving marks on the paper as I apply drops of colour to the incoming water. So there is that concept of watching. But even when I'm making the ones like that, I feel, but again, as soon as I find myself feeling like I'm watching it, then I become too conscious of the mark and things can get contrived. So I then try and absence myself and defeat them.
So that kind of idea about removing feeling or not consciously not being about it too much is a way of allowing the kind of more, say, chance to happen, or kind of that removes that conscious control.
Totally, because to make any work, and I'm not going to be able to quote him totally, but I know it was John Pertwee who said it, that to draw is not only to put down, it is also to receive. So it is that idea that, and I don't mean that in some sort of hugely spiritual way, I just mean that something happens between you and that piece of paper that is other than potentially the mark you thought you were going to make, or even if it's the mark you thought you were going to make, it's going to end up looking a bit different to what you thought. So there is this concept of responsiveness and react.
And that's very true, I think, of the group of the artists here, is that you are feeling that something is coming through you. So you are, if you like, a conduit channel, a sort of a medium for something else to come through and maybe happen. Or I think with this, more of you, particularly when we're thinking of, you actually talk about mediumship, don't you, for your work. Do you want to go into a bit more about your work? What I thought we could do is we could actually discuss one of the hitches so that the audience can actually really see what we're talking about. So I think for this one behind the auto trance piece.
Yes. Okay.
We could lead you, I mean, because I think what you said about Cecil Collins is amazing. And so it's that how we taught you then opens this sort of, this gateway for you to then experience and be able to then do a different type of work. And then sort of other things have happened to you.
Yeah.
And then you've built upon that. And then suddenly you are working in a completely different way. So we could maybe focus on this trance, but just how you got to that point.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that was amazing working with Cecil, what really stuck with me, was that he would come around the tables and look at everybody's drawings, and he always had this ridiculous sense of presence, like so many people idolised him and amazing pedestal and everything, but he did have this kind of power, and he'd often come up to me and he'd turn my drawings around and he'd say, "Oh, look at this, look, you've been given a gift." And so I'd look, and it would be a fully formed face or something, and it was like, and to him that meant that there had been literally within the alchemy of making these drawings that had come from lots of different elements all together, that somehow another thing had kind of materialized. And it was so interesting. It really went in very deeply. And when I had my major trauma back in 2006, I went into the studio, and I decided at that point that I was going to completely let go of any form of conscious control. And I think it was at that moment really, I don't know why I did it really. It was just like a complete and utter, this is the drive, I'm going to do this. And what was remarkable was that in that very open state, yes, all of these things did emerge in my painting. They formed themselves. And it was just like, it was so confusing because I'd had this major thing, and then it was also this major, incredible event happened. And because of that, it shifted something in me, and I decided that I would work with a medium. So, well, what's going on? I'm going to do this a bit more research into this. And so I went to the circle, and afterwards she asked me to bring in my drawing materials. And then I turned up, then there was this person there, and I was then to make a drawing which was based on them. And what was remarkable was that it was a bit like a combination of the sort of Cecil thing. It was like all the rhythms came out, all of the kind of flow came out. But it was such a kind of like natural thing. I wasn't filtering at all. And it was that all of these elements, all these sort of like combinations of marks and colours and everything, formed these things that you could see in the drawing, and that would tell, and it became like a map of that person. So it would talk about their kind of like their physical, their emotional, their spiritual life, their present and their past and future. And then I had to read it. It's scary, very scary. I kind of had this thing, and then I was given tasks effectively to tell that person all about their life. Oh my God, it was so extraordinary. And it just set something off in me, and I did that for such a long time. And I had so much affirmation continuously that what I was doing somehow had kind of formed this reality of this person, but I wanted to put that into my own work, and I didn't want to do it. I wanted to kind of do this thing of this connection with other people, but I didn't want to do it of people who were around because it felt like it was could potentially be quite an intrusive thing. So I settled upon antique photography, and what was remarkable was that there was no difference; it just flowed. And again, in that very unfiltered, very kind of thing. And what I do is, and so with the photograph there, or with around the corner, it's actually, I used a photocopy of the censuses from 1891 and 1901, the signatures of this couple who had each signed these censuses. But what happens is I kind of put it onto in my penny, and I just sit. I don't, because you might think, oh well, she sits and she reads the image. You can do that in a mediumistic circle. You get given a photo and you read the person. I don't do that. I've never done that. So much more to do with feeling, and then after a little while, it just builds, and then it's just off, and then I will see colours, and I will just kind of, but it's just to do with motion as much as anything. It all just kind of comes out. And what was really interesting about that one, which is very, very new, he came to the studio literally as I just finished it that week, was that she is from the Vanderbilt Costume Ball, and she's dressed up as Joan of Arc. And I did not make that foot there, because if you look at it, you can see lots of portraits of her. She's looking in all sorts of different angles, and there were different people there. But I didn't make that at all consciously by looking at her image. But actually, when you look at the image, it does look quite a lot like her. But it's also got a very similar energy to the. She is sort of representing in the this person who's kind of highly aware. She's kind of looking around. She's sort of, she's personifying this amazing figure of Joan of Arc.
I love that there's a quote here that I've got from somebody wrote about you, and it is about talking about what you're saying, which is about felt energies and the felt presences. And it's something immaterial, an atmosphere, a memory, an experience, a signature can become material through paint.
Yeah.
And I love that idea, this sort of just this small thing, this little black and white photograph sitting in an old library, and you're plucking that out, and suddenly this is a whole experience. You're going to have the energy build, and then you create this artwork that then goes out into the world again. And these layers of, it's sort of the layers of life that these have, these real people. So do you feel about that when you're creating the work? Do you think about who these people are? And
I don't concentrate on that, but what I concentrate on is creating the link. Because if I think that I was to think that, I might be filtering it through here, and I can't allow that to happen. I'm like kind of like a void where everything is kind of coming through. But I am really fascinated by, often women as well in Victorian photography, because there's a sense of longing. I want to know them. I feel these women were so underrepresented, and they were so, I don't know how was your life? What were you doing? What were you interested in? Did you get a chance to do it? Did you express yourself? What was your life? So I am that it comes very much from a heart place, a need to kind of like connect with people. I lost that.
okay, great, thank you. We're then move to Olivia, because I feel like there's a lot of memory in your work, so leading on from Chris's say. And so you had an interest in childhood and grew up in these sort of places in you. And tell us a bit more about that, but then also how that kind of may informed your artwork later. And I know specifically also with the archiving material, you also connect to that, don't you? So yours is very much about connecting. So,
yeah, it's that irony between connecting and this extreme sense of distance. So growing up in a different country to where your family is based, you're constantly sort of apart, and yet you're together in the smaller family. I was there with my mother and my stepfather, and I'm an only child, and yet I had sort of a parade of stepsisters and half-sisters under various different circumstances, back in Australia or wherever, and we have family in England. But the sense of distance, and yet being in somewhere day to day, that, it wasn't exotic, but it was just where I lived. But it was an extraordinary experience of living in these different countries, getting to travel to remarkable places from a very early age. And being an only child too, you experience it in a very different way. It sort of goes round and round in your own head, rather than bouncing off other siblings or, my mother and stepfather were their own unit and I was mine. So again, it's that thing of looking very, very intensely at things or remembering things very intensely, the fabric or the temple or whatever.
You talk about, actually that's really interesting, you talk about the whole idea of visual residue.
Yes.
So that really can come from that.
Yes, it does.
These incredible, you're probably having these senses where there's seeing around you visually, but also maybe what the smells of those foods that were being cooked, or all of these things start to come through as these sort of memories, don't they?
They do. And it's also trusting things that aren't expected, because it's just the way it is. You go through this market in Hong Kong and it's just everything's happening all at once, all at the same time. It's just fabulous. And in many ways, I use that with paint, and I let chance dictate a lot of the imagery. And every time I forget this word, and it's what you were referring to as the faces coming, pareidolia or something, where you see faces in it. And there is an element of that, and playing with it, and manipulating the paint, and it's oil-based, so it becomes something that just goes on, and the fine grain of the canvas. So it just stains it in a really interesting way, and I can just play. And I remember just looking at artists in Japan and China, and the calligraphy, and just the weight of the brush, and the lifting it up, and all these things, all this attention to detail that isn't necessarily here in the Western tradition per se, that it's in Asia. And so again, those things of the weight of an object on the surface of the canvas, or the scratching, or the crush, so they became conduits effectively in the mark making and discovering what the image conjures up. And then I manipulate it, and then I think quite consciously, and I put something in there. Other times it just comes through very naturally, under the self.
This is easy not hearing.
Yeah.
So we could say focus on mode space for a minute.
Yeah.
Because transfer what you just saying into this picture, what's happening, how would this come about, and the extraordinary techniques that you use to create these vibrations in.
It's just effectively a state of play. I mean, it is just literally, you get a dry brush, or you get, and it's just fun, because a lot of other work I do is quite musical, in a sort of, in a different sort of a way. And so this is almost sort of like light, and the place I go to when I meditate, it's like, oh, I'm here again, and it's the same sort of sensation, purely intuitive, fun and joy in mark making.
And how do you know when something was finished?
No. I mean, I just finish it. I do the next one. I'm relatively small, and so there's only so much you can do. But
and then this one, the figures started to come in.
It's basic figures, yeah. But they're just bonkers. They just came out of the brush. Those figures, they literally came out of a brush. I've got a brush that I inherited from my mother, who's an extraordinary artist, and it's like I stole it actually. And it's just a really beautiful watercolour brush, red sable, blah blah blah, Fizibay, and you just swoosh it in, and just the faces come out. All you do is just tie a little paint, and then this expression is just completely different when you split it back. It's just fun. It's really fun.
You still got all the places just kind of the magic, and the magic realism.
Yes.
The uncanny.
Yeah.
So they're kind of the words that filter into your, and is that how you see them?
It is, and humour was never part of my work until really actually quite recently, and I enjoy it. I have fun with it. So I mean, this is it's about ridiculous, but
the colour's incredible. The palette is so rich, and the others here we've got this lovely green you've been really love to use. But so you don't shy away from all the colours coming in.
Yeah,
and of scale as well, which, this is interesting for scale. Some of the artists have got large and small, concentrated on the smaller works for you.
Yeah.
But back at the studio, you involve quite big works
yes.
too.
Yes.
How do you get all of that technique into something that's that large,
It's quite hard, because it's just my studio size has always dictated the size of the work, which for every artist that's the case. And I'm trying to work that out now. How can I expand that, because I did do larger works a long time ago, and it's highly impractical. So you'll make them go smaller, but I would like to do larger ones. But yeah, I think bigger brushes are on the menu.
Oh, they're more brushes.
Yeah, bigger ones.
Oh, I think I'd like to maybe speak to Hannah. Yeah, she just say, so this is one here. We would concentrate on that dark lip when we're big at talking about size. You're going straight into
Yeah.
start what you need. But what I'd like to sort of bring out from you is this idea of the materiality of the void. You talk about the void, and I'd love to know more about that. So,
Wow.
when do you start? Yeah, it's a big.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that for me, what is perceived as void to be kind of empty, unknown, or negative, I can't help but be completely drawn, like magnetized, towards it. So I look for that in landscape. I look for it in lakes, in caves, in the horizon, in just the space between things. And then I found a long time ago, I started working on raw linen. So I would seal it with a hide glue. And even that in itself has created a kind of, if you put 2 or 3 layers on it, it starts to get a kind of sparkle to it. And people used to think that I did that on purpose. I literally could meet her and I don't. But it's just as a side note. I use all traditional processes to kind of continue the kind of lineage of paintings history. I use all natural materials, which is why another reason why I use the hide glue. And with this painting, I have, well, firstly with the raw linen, it kind of activated that empty space, just being a colour, and not just a flat colour like cotton, but linen has these different kind of tones to it, all these different grades of, weave. So depending on what the painting was going to be, I'd use a thicker weave or a really fine one. And I just found that it allowed me to leave this space, and it didn't feel empty. It felt like it had a substance to it. And then with this, it's quite a new departure for me, is to add pigment into the size as like a distemper paint. So the fabric is almost stained with the colour. It kind of, it sinks in. So I have it, it's not sort of just painted on, it kind of, the colour goes into the fabric. So it's, I don't know, it's just more like a dye. Yes. So it's a very physical thing as well, making them, especially that size, you have to work quickly as well. So, and I make the frames, so I feel like I'm constructing this world, but going back to the void.
Well, actually, that's coming in my hat. Before I get to the void, I think what you said is materials are so interesting, and how you work with them. Because when I was looking at work, suddenly I got up to 7 materials. I was like,
Oh yeah.
this is, and then I read that you're crushing the crystal, and this, wow, this is a lot. So do you sort of, what am I feeling like today, or do you look at the canvas or have an idea, or what dictates your materials?
I think it's really important to have the knowledge of like the possibility of your materials, and then in having that, it allows you to understand how far you can go. I do seem to push the materials to their limits a lot of the time. So often oil paint can look like watercolour, for example. But what was your question? Yeah.
About the materials, you've just got this breadth.
That's right. Yeah. So going back to the little bird.
Yeah.
Part of that process is through understanding my materials, working out how best to use them to communicate what I see in my mind's eye of a place. So this is a place in Iceland. After a long hike, got to like a cliff, and these two waterfalls were falling into the same bit of river. And I drew it just with pencil, just to kind of save it. And then I've done lots of iterations of this form. And then, yeah, as I just kept developing it. And it really, it just depends on what I'm trying to communicate. So this is water. Maybe.
I'm feeling that you're really interested in the way that you're vitalizing materials, and you're also, I mean, I know that you are into animism.
Yes.
And you talk about caves and waterfalls and rocks, these inanimate objects that for you become very animated. And then I feel like when you get your maybe.
Yeah.
But I feel that's interesting. Do you feel that?
Yeah. They're all quite reductive forms, but I'm trying to show kind of their life force, I think. And what's amazing about oil paint and all the different things you can do with it is you can manipulate it to give these forms these kind of character, this kind of substance. So there's a glaze in the puddle on the lake, whatever. There's no scale there, so you don't know if it's like a little puddle or if it's a massive. That's a tree resin, like a balsam, and it creates a really kind of glossy, transparent finish, and it doesn't yellow, so it's great for pale colours because it keeps the true colour. But yeah, I mean, when I was in Iceland, I don't know if it's kind of Yorty, no, but I took some black sand home with me, and I made that into paint. And so I've used that in my paintings as well to kind of, to really sort of bring the place back into the work. But yes, and I've also used things like black glass, like shards of black glass. The changes in texture, I think we'll maybe talk about it a bit later, but it does something for the viewer as well. It's like I'm trying to give back something that I saw or felt, and these different materials can kind of help me try and communicate something with like the magic that I saw or felt.
Yeah. We've put a lot of historical works in, and next to yours are two by Louise, Janin, who's an American French artist. And she kind of looked at Eastern philosophy, yes. And she brought out in hers the idea of thought, rounding off to Eohoid. And it was a place where things could happen, as opposed to an empty state.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that's something in your work, Joe's work, with here on this wall, and the one at the end. But the white spaces, you leave a lot of white space.
Yeah, I love paper. Yeah, no, I think I loved what you said about the boy. Yeah, thank you. I think for me, yes, it's almost like the area where there isn't is required to kind of hold and be the generative space of what there is. So there's this constant interbands and whatever. And much as I would love sometimes to be able to cover a whole piece of paper, I never seem to arrive at being able to do it. But I think the white paper is maybe that sort of generative void, and then there is this equally this interplay of stillness and movement, which is often when you're working with watercolour as thinly as I often am, it's certainly when working in the river, it is moving. So you're very aware of this sort of movement and stillness, and the necessity of both. That the almost the concept within the paper that the one generates the other, and from one comes the other, and you sort of return to that constantly. But that never dictates the composition or the colours or anything, but it's something certainly that I sort of hold.
And if you tell us a bit more about, how the artworks are formed, so particularly with the river and how you
Okay.
into that.
Yeah. Is there one particularly you want?
Yes.
Okay, that one.
Possible. Let's go for that.
So that one was made in a river, and so when I say it was made in a river, very simply what I've done is just apply the paint, apply droplets of water. I don't use paintbrushes or anything, so it's literally just applied. How can I describe it? I dropped the colour on, with that one to begin with, I've dropped colour on the paper and then held it in the river, and then I've gone back and applied the watercolour, just watching the river to a wave as it's coming in, and then put in the paper. But obviously I only submerge the paper to where you can, it's not pre-planned, but the paper has only got wet where you can see colour. Because obviously the colour only spreads and disperses on paper that's getting wet. Where you see whiteness, it's because the paper has stayed dry. But that is hard to control. So that, and then it may happen, and then it's probably gone back in where it's still slightly wet, back into the river. But there's
So do you feel, I just want to ask questions about river, like different seasons, different works, or different ways?
Yeah, it is seasonal for very practical reasons, because I need paper to dry to be able to transport it or move it or carry it or roll it up and stick it in my arm, or like real practicalities that need to play. If it's soggy and muddy and cold, then paper doesn't dry, and the paint almost sort of soaks it, but doesn't sit on it enough, so it doesn't become that sort of crystalline, fresh translucence. It becomes more dense because it's just taking a long time to dry, and that, which is a particular. So yeah, sunshine helps a lot, and the drying, and then there's all sort of gravity plays a big part as well. The way the paper is held, and the way the directionality of the water when it comes to the paper, gravity does play a big part. I often end up drying paper quite vertically, leaning it against a bush or grasses or trees, so that the sort of the verticality comes into it.
So with verticality, do you find that it extends what happens? Do you get?
Yeah, absolutely, because there's fluidity of the medium, and it's moving with water, and that's kind of what I want to happen.
It's interesting because the techniques of that are some similar to some of the artists, of the historic artists here. Janin did plunges.
Oh, really?
I love she pushed the lid. Yes, the red one, the middle. That was used by working with oils and dispersed pigments and then dipping it into bath and pulling it up under again.
Wow.
So in a way, working, pushing that technique, and then Ithell Colquhoun down the end was also very much involved because of romantic.
I mean, it is lovely. What ends up staying in a lot goes, and that's kind of, you know, you're watching the work, you're watching things be left on the paper, but you're watching a hell of a lot get washed away, and that's kind of lovely.
And you're also working with the rhythms of water, aren't you? Flows, is that coming in now? Your timing,
The timing's a lot of it. Yeah, there's a lot to do with, but it's just watching. Yeah, it's not some sort of magic recipe. It's just watching the water and dropping the colour on it at the moment just before it meets the paper. So it's just sort of coming together.
It's kind of like you're in tune. I mean, I will find it difficult, but it's natural for you. But then there must be a sort of natural attunement. You're knowing about the pigments and the water and your paper, and you are.
I try not to, I mean, there's no doubt there's things I repeat, but I try not and fall into, you know, I try and approach it freshly. I love I can't remember who said it. I think you said it at the beginning, that every piece of paper is a complete mystery and I can't know what's going to happen. And I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. And I try and approach each painting.
I love what you said earlier about Southeast Asia. I'm loving, you know, the white, because those people, it's terrifying to see a blank white page, and you're excited. This is
I find the British white paper really exciting.
and you know, so a lot of the works we've got here is blues and the greens and the greys, and actually you work with very strong colours too. So could you tell us a bit more, you know, the colour choices or how the colour works for you?
Yeah, I guess when I'm, because working with the watercolour of the medium of watercolour, there's a lot that is just going to happen on the piece of paper that I can't really completely control. But my choice of palette is something I can control. So I do very carefully mix colours and play with colours and have colours on separate little bits of paper in the studio, which I move around and see what works next to each other. And so that then whether I'm then working in the studio or wherever I am, I'm working within a palette that I have worked on quite hard. So I'm not just randomly picking colours. You can't really do that when you're working with a medium that is, where you might layer things very quickly on wet and things like that, because you've got to have something at hand there. It's got to be there. It's not going to let you wait. Or if you do let it wait, then you're doing something very different, because you're not, you know, that bottom one is worked all wet in wet. So that gives the sort of the haziness and the softness to the edges. If you wait longer, that's going to be very different, because you're going to be working in layers on something that is pre-dried. So you've got to have the colour ready. So I do think very carefully about colours, yeah.
Jay, I think actually I'm just going to ask a question to all of you, but I'll start with you because we're already there. And that is about what you said earlier about meaning and of other people, what the meaning is. But also a bit about the titles you use. All of you use fantastic titles. So I just wondered a bit about, say, for the audience, that experience, how your relationship or your thought, if any at all, about how the work is going to be perceived.
Okay, so I have no thoughts about that. I try and have no thoughts about that whatsoever. So that's a really easy question for me, because I can only concentrate on what I'm doing. That's enough, and usually most of the time too much. So to think about what anyone else might think of it or see, or what it might mean for them, I have no idea. And I like it that way.
Yeah.
And I really work hard at keeping it that way. If somebody has a connection or a relationship with a work, that's absolutely fantastic, and I'm more of it.
Because you
And that is-
exhibit it, don't you?
Yeah, but that is between them, and it's wonderful, and I don't want it, as a person, I don't want to go there. That's between them, and that's a wonderful thing. As far as your other question was titles, so titles I find very playful, I really enjoy. I tend to just have a big list on my phone of words and phrases I collect. It might be from something I'm reading, it might be from something that comes to me, it might be from a word that I just find myself repeating.
Quite
Quite enjoy.
It's like hunch or brink or you.
There's words that come up, and then I'll just collect them, and then I never make a work to a title. I always make the work first, and then in the days and months that follow, when it needs a title, or when I feel I want to give it a title, then I will often go through these big lists and find something. But I see a title as sort of it sits alongside. It's something you can completely ignore, happily, or it's something that just sits happily next to that work if you'd like it to.
It's not there to sit there and tell you what this is or not. Brilliant. How about you, Olivia?
Like you, I have a treasure trove of words and phrases.
Great.
Thoughts and dreams and the whole lot everywhere, written down on bits, marigold friend and everything. And it is actually a very playful thing to title work, and I really enjoy it. And I used to not do it actually, but it's like, why not? and it kind of gives the game away without being too suggestive as well. And so I really do actually enjoy titling work, because again, it's the political edge, but it's all sort of fluffy. There's an underside which you can indicate in the title.
And how about, we've got about just a few minutes there for some questions, but just a quick bar title.
Yeah, I also have a list of words inside these. It's a black boy sketchbook. Yeah, from song lyrics to words that I've found, and
So just these little treasures that you just keep. Is that
yeah.
as well?
Depends on what works it is. If it's pieces like the one in the window, then very much that they're kind of made to be individual to that particular painting. But I have structures depending on different bodies of work otherwise. So these are water trance portraits and so I kind of, and I quite like that formal kind of title thing, because I think it makes it quite humorous as well. You know, something kind of like water trance portrait. Can't remember, I think her name is Anne Hewitt as Joan of Arc. It's quite funny, and I like that, you know, and that's, I've got now her Constance Reeves as a bee. You know, there's something really wonderful about that. I kind of like the mix of formality and a little bit of playfulness.
Well, I think it's amazing because, you know, what you are dealing with, what you are showing us are really deep subjects, big subjects, and bringing in these small elements of joy and humour are fantastic. It's like full package. It's incredible. Thank you all.